everyone, time for another session. The importance of building an ontology for easy SEO reporting. Hey, hi, Ross.
Hey, Hermione, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you. How are you?
Very well.
I would like to, introduce you, Ross, which is something that, I think a lot of people already know you because I guess you are that person who is visible on a lot of ads after a video that you did in 2019. Am I right?
That is right. Yeah. So I'd done a lot of 2019 was the year of being everywhere on the internet, and Facebook ads were incredibly cheap. So yeah, I think we were racking up like 100,000 impressions a day at one point as an agency. So yeah, I've calmed down since then, so I'm not as everywhere as before. But yeah, it's good fun being on video and getting to talk to people.
Right, that's right. So, let's have Ross Tavendale, Managing Director at Type A Media, to the event. Ross, the stage is all yours.
Thank you so much. All right, guys. Well, I hope everyone is doing well. Like Kimani said, my name is Ross. I have an agency called Type A Media. Today, I'm going to talk to you about an ontology. So you got to really love SEO to find this one interesting. I personally do. I even have decorated my office with my favorite neon sign of all time, the SEO is dead sign. So let's get straight into it. We've got 54 slides to do in the next 20 minutes or so. Guys, I think the SE ranking people are going to be sending out the accompanying spreadsheet to this as well. So there will be a little take home for everyone so you can kind of do this in your own time as well. So without further ado, let's get started. If you've got any comments as we go, let's go. So firstly, what is an ontology for those that don't really know? Say hello to Yarno in the comments there. He is actually the king of ontologies. If anyone's in the comments, please DM Yarno about this. He's got a lot of expertise. So let's talk about what an ontology actually is. It's essentially just a bunch of concepts and categories that are interwoven and connected to each other. So a bunch of entities that are connected. And that might sound quite familiar to anyone that works in SEO. As soon as you say entities, connected entities, that is, of course, schema.org. And for those who don't know, schema.org is essentially code that describes code. Shout out to the schema.org team who have decided not to do any design on that website since the 90s, but we go on it so much as SEOs. So, an ontology, schema, is a type of ontology. And today we're going to talk about how to build your own personal ontology. So let's start with an example. This is from Schema. So there's this person in the world called Jane Doe, and there's a web page about her. And this is what the code looks like on the web page. Fine. But when you actually look at it, you can see that there's actually a bunch of entities and statements about who Jane Doe is. So that's the exact same code you've just seen. And here are all the statements. We know that this is a person. We know where they work. Job title is a type of statement related to the entity. And essentially, this is all the ontological information about the entity Jane Doe. So when it comes to ontologies, I want you to think about it like it's a dictionary of objects that are all connected to one another. So schema is like a many-to-many dictionary, lots of entities connected in lots of different ways. Inside of schema, we call these statements and identifiers. So these are two important concepts when we're building an ontology, and I'm just going to touch on these briefly. So if we go to somewhere called Wikidata, this is essentially what powers the knowledge graph and a bunch of stuff like it. You will see a bunch of entities. One in particular is Elon Musk. And there's a bunch of statements about Elon Musk that describe what this entity is. One of them is that he's a human. Based on some of the work that he's doing, I'm not sure how human he is, but okay. And an identifier that confirms that he's human, which is his Twitter handle. So that's like a really basic view of what a statement is and what an identifier is when it comes to talking about these ontologies. Now, let's think about this in the context of at work. So Anyone in the chat, if you can tell me who works in an SEO agency, please say hello. Who works in-house, please say hello. I'd love to get a feel for the kind of general split. But when it comes to doing reporting without an ontology, usually in an SEO agency, you'll say things like, last month we updated the title tags. The click-through rate is the same, but we're 20% up year on year traffic wise. And next month we'll fix the 404s. And then the client looks at you, you look at the client, and they're meant to be happy with that. So the reason why that's a bit of a problem is because the client's going to come and say, like, well, okay, did the title tag changes cause any like uplift? Like, what was the click-through rate change? What contributed to the increase? Was it a brand increase, a non-brand increase? Was it commercial traffic? Was it not? Like, you're going to fix the 404s next. Like, what's going to happen if you do that? And on it goes. And you don't have the answers for it because you don't have the ontology built into your reporting. So in an ideal world, if the client asks, give a client a report, you'll be saying things like, last month we updated the SERP presentation issues, which is a subset of updating metadata. And then you're able to zoom in on that, the exact URLs that were affected by it. 15% increase, 7% increase in organic revenue. Perfect. Cause and effect reporting, because we've started to tag up the sort of things that we're reporting on. Also, one of the things that I guarantee that you're not doing in your day-to-day is you're not able to say, Mr. or Mrs. Client, we're about to fix problem X, canonicals, for example, the value of which is £5,000 to your business and the cost to fix is only 100. Because how could you possibly know what the value is and what the cost is of something so nebulous? Well, when we build an ontology in a second, we're going to show you. So, firstly, a little primer. Entities are typically connected. So if we go back to Schema, we've got Strathclyde University, which is a university, and Type A Media, which is my business. There's nothing that technically connects them other than they are like establishments until you add in another entity, which is me. I know that picture looks like the cartoon character Tintin, but I guarantee that that is not, and it is me. So I am the entity Ross, who is a statement person, who is a statement alumni of University of Entity Strathclyde University. And you see how these statements and identifiers start to mix together and create this connected web. So we're going to be doing that in just a second with our own SEO reporting, auditing, etc. Now, the thing with an ontology is once all these entities are connected, the words we put on top of it to describe how they're connected are essentially just giving them meaning. So, for example, every URL on your website, there is meaning behind it. So, for example, a blog post URL, that has got a meaning of being a blog, not a product. Product categories, there's meaning behind a URL that is like for men's clothing versus women's clothing. So all these little things that are attached to your URL give them meaning using the schema language, statements, and identifiers. Now, the ontology that we see inside of Schema is going to be very different to the one you're able to create for your clients and your reporting, because Schema has millions of entities and billions of identifiers. So it's like a fractal relationship. It's a many-to-many kind of organization. However, when you're doing it on your own, and the way we're going to set it up is it's going to be a one-to-many organization. So when you're thinking about your SEO reports, your audits, your keyword research, you might be like, there's no entities in them though. Those are just documents we send to clients. That's just SEO work we do. There actually is, but it's a single entity, and that entity is the URL. So if you think about when we're building an ontology, it's kind of the shape of a bicycle wheel, the URL in the middle, and lots of different identifiers and statements that come off of it. So a URL can be described as many things, and there's lots of different metrics we can apply to a URL that we're going to start using. Getting lots of people, I think there's a little bit of delay in the comments. Thank you to everyone that's saying. We've got Andrew is in-house. Trishan, hello from South Africa. Anton Shulka, Ross Crown. Thank you very much, Anton. Keep the comments coming, guys. If there's anything, we'll answer them all at the end. So, a classic example of how the exact same thing means multiple things to multiple people. So, if we were to think of the URL, any URL, let's say on a blog post URL, if you are a brand manager, social media manager, SEO person, CMO, it's the same URL, but it means something absolutely different to you. So when it comes to reporting, we need to build an ontology into all of our SEO processes so that we can pivot by the ontology point that they care about to show them the data that they want to see. A really good example of this is if you ever speak to a client about tagging and perception, think about things that you wear on your eyes, right? What are they called? Are they called glasses? Are they called spectacles? Are they called eyewear? It's all the same, right? It's the exact same product, but there's an ontology we need to come up with in order to describe them in different ways. So, because everything has a completely different meaning depending on the person consuming the information, we're going to build a common language for the client so that regardless of who's trying to get to the information, there's like a common language that we're using to understand what's going on. Now, a couple of the smart SEOs in the room will be like, ontology sounds like smart. Is that just a fancy way of saying tagging? Kind of. It kind of is half fancy tagging, half not. It's a little bit different. But so a tagging, if you're to tag, let's say, a URL with a bunch of different meanings, let's say by intent or keyword group or something like that, going back to the schema stuff, that would be classed as a statement. This URL is blog. This URL is transactional. Cool. But there's no metrics behind that. So you can't actually really do anything other than declare what it is. And declaring that a blog URL is a blog URL is pointless. We need identifiers, or in our case, we need metrics to put onto it so we can do things like forecast, answer and make business cases to get the SEO actually done, and show cause and effect when it comes to the reporting as well. So, why do you need an ontology inside of your business? Mostly because 9 times out of 10, reporting lacks why we're doing something and how we're doing something. So, if you've ever said to a client, organic traffic is up by X%, hang your head in shame, because that's the most pointless metric and pointless way of reporting, because organic traffic is such a nebulous thing. Like, what was it? Brand? Was it non-brand? Was it affected by direct? Did paid spend more that week? Like, we need to know why things are being driven and what is driving it. And the only way to do that is to build these ontologies into both the auditing side and the reporting side. And this is exactly what I've said. So, like, when we're putting these reports together, we need to be able to answer all of these questions. Like, anyone ever had like a core update hit their client's website? How do you answer that? Like, after you've changed your underwear, you're like, oh my, what do I say? Well, if you've got an ontology set up, it tells you straight away. So it's such a big deal. The other thing is, what I see quite a lot is when we're doing any sort of technical auditing for the client. So let's say we're putting together a migration strategy or a tech audit or a keyword research or whatever. And let's say we've done all this. We know the content gaps. We know all the big laundry list of technical problems. Great. What do you fix first? Why do you fix it? And when the client's like, so you're going to go get my developers to completely change the information architecture of the website, that's going to cost me money. What will happen when you do that? A lot of SEOs are like almost trying to, present like a religious experience. It's a completely faith-based thing. They're like, have faith, the SEO will work. It takes, and then this was a good one. It takes 6 to 12 months to work, which it does, but also like you need to be able to set a hypothesis and answer the hypothesis, and you have to make it commercial, money in, money out. So let's get into building our clients some first principle thinking reporting inside of both the audits and the reports themselves, and let's build this common language for them. So what we're going to be doing in a second with the spreadsheet that we provided is what what to optimize it, how to forecast, benefits of optimizing the thing, and then how to report on what you've just done. All right. So a bunch of you already do this. Like it seems like all this kind of new language, like it's a classic SEO thing. Like we just constantly reinvent the wheel. And a lot of you will do it already. So, if you're using SE ranking, for example, you'll get like intent information in your rank reports. You'll know that a keyword is transactional informational. So that's a type of ontology. You'll also split your stuff into brand versus non-brand, also a type of ontology. And you'll also categorize based on where in the website a lot of this stuff is, also an ontology, but it's a bit basic. Slightly more advanced, we have a client who sells chalets in the French Alps. Their customers are owners of chalets and then people who want to stay in them. So we need to group them into customer types. So that's like a slightly more advanced way of building and chopping out this categorization. And if anyone kind of pushes back, so it can be a lot of work to do this internally. This is typically where I go with it. The reason why most people do not do this is because it's easy to do on the reporting side. It's easy to go into Looker Studio and like keywords tag things or change brand to non-brand. That's very straightforward. How do you do it on your tech audits? How do you do it in your keyword research and gap analysis? It's a completely different world. And also, to make this effective, you have to do the ontology across every single URL on the website. So if you're sitting in here listening to this and you are an SEO manager running a 100,000 plus page website, you're like, there is no way. There is not enough interns in the world to want to tag every URL on this site. Well, we'll get into that as well. All right. So the areas we're going to be using this is essentially, instead of it being called an entity, we're going to say URL. Instead of statement, we're going to use something different. And instead of identifier, it's going to be a metric. All right. So just that's the kind of language we're going to use moving forward. You probably see that if you've done any Looker Studio reports, it already exists for you. So when you connect Search Console and Google Analytics to blend the data, you have something called a joining key. And that joining key is the URL. Now I want you to think of your SEO reports and your SEO audits. What are the one thing in both of them that could join them together? It's the URL. So because the URL exists in your audit and it exists on Google Analytics, anything that we then tag or add an ontology to can be interchanged between the both. So we're able to release revenue and traffic data from GA and put it into audits, forecasts, things like that. So the URL is the core thing we're going to build everything around. This already happens all over the world. So IP addresses, credit cards, all that sort of stuff is used as a joining key to join this information together. The only difference here is we're using the entity, which is going to be the URL. All right. So the only major problem with doing this sort of work is that there's no metrics on the audit side. What do I mean by that? If you audit a website for a client and there's like 100 404 errors you need to fix, is there any metrics that say how much that's worth to the client's business? No, sir. So that's something we need to build in on the auditing side, and we don't need to build it in on the reporting side. So you'll find that most of your audits actually already have an ontology. You just don't call it that. So you'd be quite surprised to see that when we reframe your thinking slightly, and instead of you looking at recommendations that you're making to the client, we call them statements. And instead of looking at identifier metrics, we call them identifiers. So it's just a slight reframe in order to get you to a good place. So I'm just going to show you an example in a second of how that actually looks inside of your audits typically. Now, what is a 404? Well, a 404 error is a type of statement, right? But you could also say that it's a type of server error. And then at a level of extraction outside of that, you can also say server errors cause indexing issues. So there's three things that you can connect together that essentially is the same as the 404 error, but they're layers of abstraction away from just a 404 error. Similarly, when it comes to things like title tags, So when you say things like, this has got a missing title tag, you're making a statement about the entity, which is the URL. Or you could have said, there's a presentation issue with the entity, or you can say it's causing click-through rate issues. The same words, the same entity, but with slightly different viewpoints. So if we can start doing this at scale through every single thing we do, in from a technical audit to a report, we should be able to get some very, very interesting results. Right. I've talked at you guys for the last coming up 20 minutes. You're doing well. We're going to get into the juicy stuff now. So I assume now we're all happy with what an ontology is, why you need one, and some of the language I'm about to use. So if you go to the Google Sheet that I've provided, you'll see everything is laid out one by one. Click on File, make a copy, and that's the copy. I'd just like to say that although it's my agency's URLs in here, these are not real numbers. I literally just went equals rand between 0 and 1000 for all of this. So if you think, oh, juicy commercial data, it's made up just to illustrate this. But please do follow along. Okay, first and foremost, a technical map. Now, when you do your audits, it's usually based on problems, not URLs. I do a tech audit, I run a crawler, and it comes back and it's like, you have 20 404 problems, you have a sitemap issue, you have a canonical issue based. And inside of those are all the URLs. Flip that on its head, build in your sheet the list of all your URLs, and in the rows, put every conceivable technical thing in either a yes or a no or a 1 or a 0. That is our technical map, and that's going to be the basis of how we build this ontology. All right, next, we're going to take that technical map, all those rows we've just built, we're going to put them in a big list. So I want to see every single technical check you're doing, every single content problem you can come up with, whatever it is, massive list. It'll be hundreds in the list. And I then want you to categorize it, but I only want you to do up to 10 potential themes of problem. And this is going to be the basis of starting to make this ontology. The reason why we only want 10 is because this is what we're going to pivot things by later. So putting in too many things to describe it, it kind of loses its meaning. Next, adding metrics. So we've taken our list of technical problems and then we've turned them into themes. And we're now going to take these themes and we're going to start adding identifiers, or in this case, metrics, to our statement. In this case, the category of issue, right? So hygiene, which is things like fixing 404s, canonicals, server errors, things like that, we'll mark it high, medium, and low, 1, 2, and 3. So we'll say that hygiene is a 3 when it comes to importance, because if the page doesn't exist, well, what are we doing here? And the difficulty is 2, and we'll go through all the themes with that. So not only have we just categorized every possible technical outcome, we've also started to give it some metrics that we can start hooking onto in terms of how hard is this to implement and how important is this to implement. Depending on the type of work you're doing, these statements will change, but this is just an example. Now we get into the good stuff. We're starting to combine this information. List of URLs, and I want you to go and count on your original technical map. Obviously, don't manually count it. Use a COUNTIF or a SUMIF. Every single time for the first URL that a hygiene problem arises, 404s, canonicals, whatever, count it up, add it in, and do that for every single URL and every single technical problem. And then what we want to do is create this thing in yellow at the end, which is our priority score. So if we remember from the previous slide, we have this here, this ratio, which is importance versus difficulty, which is essentially how we prioritize. And then we're going to multiply it by the number of problems we've got. So we're doing this at a URL level. So we've now just attached a bunch of meaning and a bunch of metrics to every technical problem at a URL level. But I don't know if you've ever tried to go into CMO and get them to sign off an SEO project by saying things like, we need to fix the sitemaps. They don't give a shit. They're like, well, no, we're paying you X for the retainer. What's our Y return? Got to put numbers in there, got to make it financial. So in the next sheet, you'll see again the same list of URLs that are in your technical audit, because that's our joining key. We're going to pull in the clicks and the revenue per URL for the last 12 months from Google Analytics. Cool. Nice and easy. And now we're going to get to a place where we're going to start really getting into it. All right. So after you've done that, I want you to do keyword mapping. I want you to map for every URL that you've got there that you've just pulled from Google Analytics, map it to a keyword, and also start adding things that you want in your ontology. It could be anything. So for me, it's things like service type, it could be customer type, it could be profitability. We've put keyword target, service type, and intent, just as a quick example. Essentially, the more things you put in, which is in purple, is the more things you can pivot by. So if you know in your business, oh, the boss asked me for how the new blog posts are doing or how the blog's doing every Monday, you'll probably want something that looks at informational content and specifically looks at blogs or certain themes of blogs. Or maybe you've got a commercial director that is always asking about very specific things that happen from a conversion standpoint in the website. You'll want to put that information in here as well. And then we just start to combine everything. So we've got the Google Analytics stuff and we've got our audit stuff, but they're not combined yet. So you remember that priority score where we took how hard it is to implement it and how important it is, and we had a ratio? So we can take that and we can essentially say, for every URL on this site, show me how much revenue we make per click. Okay. Now multiply it by the priority score, and that now gives you a value score. So the same way that in AdWords you get cost per click, on the SEO side, you've just created a new metric that I want you to get all of your stakeholders very excited about: value per click. Because if you get them to start using this language and it's proven through this ontology you're building for them, you can very quickly show them how much cash potential value they're going to make and how hard it is to make it by building things out like this. And here we go. So the same way that PPC has CPC, we now have VPC. And it's all thanks to the fact that we've started to create this map in this ontology on the audit side as well as the reporting side. And then we can start doing some really funky things. So if you all want to go to the very last tab on the sheet, you're going to see, based on any questions that people ask you, you can now pivot and show them the exact answer that they need. So if the question is on the Type A website, which service should we optimize for first? There's a million things to do in marketing. How do we prioritize? We can see that, well, the priority and the forecast value for the service type SEO, which is all SEO based URLs that have been tagged in our ontology. The ontology is a pivot point for everything, is worth this much. All right, so we should probably go like that. Right, okay, team, we're going to focus on SEO. And then you get some pushback from someone who's in PPC, and you're like, well, actually, here's the data that I've got, and you can change it live with them because you've built this ontology into the audit side and the reporting side. Next, you then have a conversation with one of your heads of content, and they're like, we need to build more landing pages, because that's how we sell. We sell blue widgets. We need more blue widget pages. You can go at this and be like, well, actually, if we were to build informational pages through the blog, it's actually worth more to us, considerably more. In fact, here's the hard number. And then they might go, oh, right, okay. So you've got hard data with cash behind it to show people to get your agenda across, and it's all backed up with real information. This is a surprise to me. Like, you would expect just build transactional, but no, in this case, the ontology shows that informational is better. What about keyword targets? Exact same thing. Because it's at the URL level and everything's aggregated out from there with this ontology we just put over the top of it, then we can just do this drill down or drill up as much as we like. So, I mean, when it comes to it, we can see here that SEO services and finance SEO have the same priority level of 9. how do you make the decision then? Well, because we've pulled in the information from Google Analytics and done it in a way to like properly build out our ontology, we can see that actually it's way more worth it to go for the SEO services one versus the finance one. So we're getting context on why we're doing things instead of like randomly saying SEO services, that's the generic keyword. Let's do that one. So we're getting the why behind a lot of our actions. And that is it. Thank you so much for listening to me ramble to you about ontologies. I hope you found it useful. And if you've got any questions, I would love to go over them with you.
Yes, Ross, it was very much detailed, very much thorough. I mean, I was like all eyes out and just, I was like, okay, here is the priority score. Okay, I'm just making notes. Okay. Ah, it was too detailed, really loved it. And I'm sure a lot of people would have learned really key things. Usually, what we miss out on is, is something that, usually clients want to hear out actual, I would say actual results, right? And not how many, blogs you want to write or how many landing pages do you write until and unless you know the value out of it, right? So I guess this ontology brings value to the reporting thing, right? So that's something which
Yeah,
is very
absolutely. It kind of changes the conversation a little bit. I think in SEO we get stuck into this procurement mindset. So it's like how many units of X can I get for my money? And that's how people sell to clients. That's how clients try to buy. But if you're selling to clients based on we'll do 10 articles, we'll do these many links, like that's a race to the bottom and there's no value there. And the reason why you're unable to break out of that is because you can't say to the client, we're going to do these deliverables at this cost, and the forecast value is this. But with
right.
this, you can. It's a little extra work up front, but it just means that you put this money in, you get this money out. The PPC guys do it, so can we.
Exactly, and that's why it is very easier for PPC guys to get things really accepted fast, and we are still struggling.
Yeah, it's interesting with PPC. And the nice thing about building this ontology up front is when PPC start really spending on brand, you can very quickly, your organic clicks will go down, but your impressions will stay the same. So you can use the ontology to say, oh, well, part of our ontology was if it's brand or not. And we can actually see that, yes, not only are they spending on brand and cannibalizing us, here's the exact URLs, here's the service lines, here's the whatever. Depending on who you're talking to, you can give them the exact place it's being cannibalized. And it stops becoming a academic conversation. It becomes a very real conversation.
Right. That's on points. Seriously. So okay, without wasting a moment further, I'm sure a lot of people would be waiting for answers. So let me take up a few questions. Okay. So we have one question from Roberta. How do you update and maintain your ontology as your website or client's website evolves and grows?
Lots of different ways to do it. So the way in which we do it at Type A, so typically one of the biggest things that you kind of hit up against at the start is that things like Google Sheets and Excel only have 2 million available cells, and as you fill that out, it gets very, very challenging. So the best way to do that is have something called data pipelines in place. So have some sort of database. So BigQuery, we run Google Suite. So BigQuery is what we use for our database, and have all of the different tables separate. And what I mean by tables is your technical table. So when you crawl the website and get all the issues out, that should be its own table. This joining key thing is essential. And so the sources coming in needs to be automated in some sort of a way, and you need some sort of a queue. So if you're in PPC, you'll do search query reports every day, week, month, depending on how much your spend is. Search query reports are essentially based on what you've bid on. Here's the things that you didn't tell us to bid on. Here's like the extra stuff. This is pertains to this question. So when you build out your initial ontology, then you add 100 pages, you need something built into your data pipelines that say, hey, the last crawl showed 500 URLs. We now have 600 URLs. Those need to go into another table to be looked at. What I tend to say to people at the start is if you're able to keyword map programmatically based on URL structure, great. If not, before you do anything, have a big grown up conversation with the client about changing their URL structure so that you can programmatically do this. But the short answer is you create data pipelines that automatically push into databases and then alert you when numbers change. So if it was 500 URLs, it turns into 600. There should be some queuing system somewhere that pushes it to you. BigQuery's lovely. You can connect to Slack and all sorts of things to ping you when there's a change. So it's a little bit more complicated, but that's how I would typically deal with it.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, I guess Ole's question was already covered during your session about, sharing the Google Sheets and all of those things, right? That how you present it to your clients and the stakeholders, right? About the SEO reports. So I'll
Mm.
take another question from Raymond. Could you share how you align your ontology with your target audience, search intent, and behavior?
Yeah, so search intent is relatively straightforward. So a lot of this starts with a meeting with the client. You have to understand the products they sell and what they really care about. So we do something called a RACI matrix. So project managers will know what this is. RACI stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, informed. And that's what you do at the start. And you have these kind of case meetings with all of the main stakeholders in a business, and you ask them like what they care about and what they look at. The best way to work out the what was the exact thing they were looking for? Search 10 and but yeah,
Yeah,
the
search intent
behavior.
and behavior.
Yeah, the best way is actually to look at the reporting they're currently using and use that as the basis for the interview you do with them. In terms of behavior, you define that because you don't want to have reflexive reporting on what's happening. You want to have proactive reporting. So if I care about a certain type of behavior, for example, I want them to click this button, use this service, download this thing, I set that up as a little honeypot for them to do. And if they're not fulfilling that behavior, we know there's a problem. Intent, nine, like most of the tools, SEO tool, I think SEO ranking has got some sort of intent inside of their keywords. Or you can just create your own dictionary. So if it says certain words and certain things, classify it as commercial or informational or navigational. In terms of intent, those are the three we use: commercial at the top, informational, which is converts to emails and things like that, and then conversational, which is more engagement based content.
Right. That's amazing, Ross. It was really wonderful having you. Thank you. Thank you so much for, sharing such detailed insights. And I'm pretty much sure that, people will be waiting for your PPT and even the Google Sheets template that you are using internally, right?
Yeah, and any questions, I'm happy to answer. I'm at rtavs on Twitter if anyone wants to continue the
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah. He can be definitely reached out on Twitter, on any other platform as well. He's very active, just like me.
Yes, and thank you so much for hosting. It's been a pleasure.
Yep. It was really an honor to have you, Ross. Thank you so much.